What's up guys, Gongrongzong here. So a lot of people have been jumping on the bandwagon in the forums, on YouTube, on Reddit about the Sand Lane, the group of vampiric elves that we encounter primarily in the Wrath expansion, speculating that they're going to be a new allied race due to a short dialogue that Rohan and Sylvanas have concerning them in Battle for Azeroth. Now, I'm definitely not here to purposefully throw a wet blanket on anything, and I personally really love the concept of vampires. I mean, who wouldn't want to play as a vampire? But unfortunately, as of right now, adding them as an allied race just doesn't seem to make any sense at all. Before we go into their backstory though, let's go through the first and strongest reason on why it's highly unlikely they won't become an allied race. Number 1. Ian already said no to High Elves. I think it's pretty clear from the recent Q&A that Blizzard is not going in the direction of more playable elves for WoW, especially those of High Elf origin. There are the Blood Elves for the Horde, the Void Elves for the Alliance, and that's all we're going to get. Their skeletons, their animations, and their emotes are all exactly the same. To speculate after Ian's response that Blizzard is going to add yet another elf race to the game, and to the Horde no less, is nigh impossible. This is also corroborated by how Blizzard has stated that there will be no immediate plans for the addition of a Wildhammer Dwarf allied race, as we already have two options for dwarves, the Bronzebeard ones and the Dark Iron allied race ones. So no third option of dwarves and no third option of high elves. In addition, there are already two types of elves in the Horde, the Nightborn and the Blood Elves. I'm pretty sure that if Blizzard were to include yet another race of elves to the Horde, making it 3 types of elves in the Horde in total, it would upset a substantial part of the Horde player base. As much of a controversial opinion as this is, it is definitely true that not every Horde player wants Orgrimmar to be filled with elves, and Blizzard is well aware of that. This is the strongest reason by far, and no other reason will trump it. However, let's explore some actual lore reasons why they also don't make sense. Number 2. There are way too few of them. Now, what exactly do I mean by this? Numbers have never been an indicator of whether an allied race can be added to the fold, as it can be seen in the addition of the Void Elves to the Alliance. I have even argued for this point myself in a High Elf video I made, in that numbers don't determine the viability of allied races. However, what I'm saying is that there are really way too few of them. Literally, like there are perhaps less of them than the numbers of fingers we have. When the Scourge invaded the Eastern Kingdoms under Arthas, Quel'Thalas, home of the High Elves, was one of the cities that came under attack. As we know from playing through Warcraft 3, Quel'Thalas was razed to the ground. 90% of the High Elves were killed in the Scourge invasion, with the remaining 10% rallying under Prince Kael'thas and renaming themselves the Blood Elves in honor of their fallen kin. This 10% was then split into 2 segments, with some following Kael'thas to seek for an alternative source of magic for their people to feed on, while the rest stayed back at Quel'Thalas to rebuild their home under Regent Lord Lothamar. On his quest to find a new source of magic, Kael soon met and teamed up with the Naga and Illidan, who eventually made his way to Northrend, culminating in the battle against Arthas in order to destroy the Frozen Throne. Illidan was mortally wounded, he lost the battle, and his armies retreated back to Outland. This is where the vampiric elves originated from. Out of the handful of blood elves that had survived and remained scattered on Northrend, Arthas chose to kill and resurrect the most powerful ones of their race, turning them into the new race of the Sand Lane. If we do some simple math, which I am very bad at, so if I get this wrong, please feel to correct me, out of the 10% of blood elves that survived, perhaps 5% of the blood elves followed Kael and 5% stayed back home with Lothamar. Out of this 5%, perhaps 2% of them perished and 2% managed to retreat back home to Outland. So out of the remaining 1% that got stuck on Northrend, which is already a very generous estimate to claim that 1% of the entire High Elf population got stuck on Northrend, the Lich King would only choose to resurrect a handful of them. Basically, we could safely put this at less than 0.1% or even 0.01% of the High Elf population. To make matters worse, their numbers would dwindle even further during the events of the Wrath of the Lich King. While under the control of Arthas, the Sand Lane would primarily dwell within the Temple of Ankylar or Icecrown Citadel itself, both of which were attacked and cleared out by the combined forces of the Horde, the Alliance, and the Argent Crusade. Almost every major Sand Lane NPC that we encounter in-game, including their entire leadership, has been slain. With no plausible way to reproduce, there are literally just a handful of them alive, and unlike the Void Elves that can in theory reproduce by converting High Elves over to the Void, or the Forsaken that currently have the Valkyr to constantly raise new ones, there currently exists no other way for there to be more Sand Lane other than through the powers of the Lich King himself. One point of contention is that we do encounter the daughter of Blood Queen Lanathel, the now deceased leader of the Sand Lane, in Violet Citadel during Legion. However, one singular NPC is not in any way close to an indication that there are vast numbers of them still surviving. Unlike the Silver Covenant in the High Elf debate that has a sprawling presence throughout Northrend and Dalaran, this is but one Sand Lane NPC, and unfortunately, she too dies at the hands of adventurers. Nevertheless, this isn't just a debate about the numbers, but also about the actual role that the Sand Lane have in the game, which leads us to the last point. Number 3. The Sand Lane are primarily used as NPCs of great significance. Throughout WoW, any Sand Lane that we encounter are either holding a great leadership position, in command of a Scourge base, or dwelling within the innermost sanctums of Icecrown Citadel. These are not random NPCs that we can slay in vast numbers, but are very powerful individuals handpicked by Arthas to be resurrected to serve as his lieutenants or commanders. The Blood Princes that we encounter as raid bosses in Icecrown, alongside Blood Queen Lanathel, the leader of the Sand Lane, often receive orders directly from the Lich King himself. Some of the more prominent tasks that they have carried out include leading the second Scourge invasion, in which we got to kill a ton of zombies in our capital cities before the launch of Wrath, the resurrection of Archmage Arugal himself, and the complete corruption of the famous blade Quel'Dalar. In the same vein, unlike the Silver Covenant High Elves, these elves are few and far in between. They do not have army encampments dotting the landscape. They are not seen in groups anywhere in Northrend, except within the inner halls of Icecrown Citadel. They are beings of astonishing and formidable power, more powerful than perhaps Sylvanas herself. They represent the direct opposite of what Blizzard is trying to conceptualize in terms of playable races. When we choose a race, we start off, for a lack of a better term, as a simple peasant with no power whatsoever. We then work our way up the ranks to eventually become someone of prominence. If the Sand Lane were to be introduced, we would start our allied race journey as an all-powerful elf wielding some of the most powerful and evil magics known to men. I know a lot of things in WoW don't make sense, but it really makes little sense to have an all-powerful, high-ranking Sand Lane start off his journey by killing boars in the Barrens. Simply put, the Sand Lane are just allies of the Horde that are joining the fight in battle for Azeroth. This has been seen numerous times in the history of WoW. During Mists of Pandaria, the Jinyu teamed up with the Alliance and the Hosen were friendly with the Horde. During Wrath, the Kaluak teamed up with both factions. During WOD, the Arauqua teamed up with us too. This is all just part of the narrative of both factions calling upon different allies to help them in whatever the big bad may be at the time. It is in no way indicative that each and every friend of a faction is going to turn into an allied race. The Sand Lane are clearly there to help out against the Blood Trolls in Battle for Azeroth at the behest of Sylvanas, seeing as how they are also innately skilled in the art of blood magic. And unfortunately, that's it. There's little reason for them to turn into an allied race at all. However, with all that being said, I think there is a chance for them to become an allied race, but just not at the current moment. Some minor spoilers have revealed that Talia 4 Dragon, the daughter of the current Lich King, will make an appearance in Battle for Azeroth. Whatever her role may be in BFA, it could be an indication that Bolvar will be heavily involved in the next expansion's content. Over the past few Q&As, I noticed that Ian has repeatedly gone on to say that in the past they approached WoW with a short-term approach in mind, planning only within the current expansion, and never expected the game to last as long as it has. But now, they have switched over to planning for the long term, whether it be in terms of gameplay, the story, or the overall health of the game itself. Talia may be, just like the addition of the Sand Lane, a hint as to what the next expansion may be. It comes as no surprise that eventually Blizzard will release an expansion about the return of the Lich King, and that will be the optimal time to release the Sand Lane as an allied race. There will be inherent reasons for them to stop the Lich King if he turns evil, or there will be a basis for their numbers to grow again if he starts resurrecting Blood Elves into his service. In fact, there is speculation that Bolvar may even join the Alliance, and if that's the case, then the Sand Lane may in fact become an Alliance allied race. So to wrap it up, I really don't enjoy throwing a wet blanket on others' ideas in wanting a fun allied race. I personally think a vampiric elf would be very fun indeed, and if Blizzard does release them, I'll definitely be one of those to re-roll as one. But at this current point, they just don't make any sense at all, both from a development and storytelling point of view. If you're new to the channel and you've watched all the way to this point, consider hitting that subscribe button, as I'll always be doing more of these videos as more and more of the expansion gets revealed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Azeroth.